Democracy. Our way of life. Oh, hello. But freedom doesn't come free. No! Sweet liberty! No! Look familiar? Scenes like these are happening all over the galaxy right now. You could be next. That is, unless you make the most important decision of your life.
Oh boy, have I been enjoying Helldivers 2. I can't wait to log back in and liberate the galaxy from wretched hive and villainy. Oh, what's this? Helldivers 2 account linking update? As such, as of May 6th, all new Helldivers 2 players on Steam will be required to connect their Steam account to a PlayStation Network account. Current players on Steam will start to see the mandatory login from May 30th and will be required to have linked to Steam and PlayStation Network account by June 4th? Huh? We understand that while this may be an inconvenience to some of you, this step will help us to continue to build a community that you are all proud to be a part of. Many thanks for your continued support of Helldivers 2, Sony Interactive Entertainment. What? What the fuck? So, unless you've been living under a rock for over the past week or so, you should know about the recent drama surrounding Helldivers 2 and how Sony fucked around with the PC community and eventually found out. Well, let's rewind it back a little bit, shall we? Helldivers 2. Some might say it's an absolute masterpiece. Some might even say it's 2024's Game of the Year. And PlayStation fanboys will tell you that it wasn't at all carried by PC. Well, console wars aside, Helldivers 2 was and still is a very, very good game. Releasing on February 8th, this game absolutely blew up. It blew up so much, in fact, that the servers couldn't even handle the sheer number of people playing it, and there was about a week where you had to wait in a queue for hours in order to finally get your boots on the ground. Helldivers 2 hit an all-time peak of 458,000 players on Steam and hasn't slowed down since, at least significantly, due to Arrowhead Game Studios, the developer behind this masterpiece, pushing out update after update fairly consistently. Helldivers 2 is also a fantastic example of how a talented, passionate studio can go against the grain of AAA gaming and its norms to create something with the sole focus of player experience at mind, rather than trying to generate as much immediate income as possible. But I'm not here to talk about why Helldivers 2 is amazing. If you want to learn more about that, go watch this video. What I am here to tell you about, however, is how Sony, the game's publisher and owner of Arrowhead, almost just ruined one of the best games to come out in the last few years. You see, when launching Helldivers 2, Sony went in a direction they don't normally go in when launching a PlayStation title by releasing their game on PC the very same time they launch it on console. Usually what they'll do is launch their game on PlayStation and wait a little while, sometimes a year or two, until they release it on PC. And I guess they do this because they think the timed exclusivity aspect of this will entice people to buy their consoles. Now, when they released Helldivers 2 on PC day and date, and people saw how much success the game was having due to the majority of the player base being from the PC community, people were excited because of the potential for Sony to start launching other future PlayStation titles on PC day and date as well. And like I mentioned earlier, there are still plenty of people, and let's be honest, we should know who those people are, that cope with their own stupidity by telling you PC did absolutely nothing for this game, when that's just not the case. I mean, when servers were being overloaded with players to the point where you had to wait in a queue to play the game, the player cap at the time was roughly 333,000, so they had to increase that cap to 450,000 and later to 700,000 to accommodate for even more players. And during the time where the cap was 450,000, Helldivers 2 had well over 400,000 concurrent players on Steam, which, if you do the math, there could have only been about 50,000 remaining players coming from PlayStation, creating a near 90% to 10% split. Matt Piscatella on Twitter even pointed out that, quote, with PC, Helldivers 2 is already the 7th highest grossing Sony published game in history. Without PC, it wouldn't currently rank among the top 20. But why am I bringing this up, you ask? Well, I think this goes to show just how important the PC community is for games nowadays. Because it's no coincidence that as soon as Sony decides to grow a pair and release a game day and date on PC, it has massive, overwhelming success. So it came as a surprise to everyone when Sony put out an update on the Helldivers 2 Steam page on May 3rd, telling PC players that in order to play the game after June 4th, they'd be required to link their Steam account to PSN, a PlayStation Network account, meaning that if you had already bought the game, you'd be completely locked out of playing it unless you did so. Now, obviously, there are a few problems with this, but before we jump into those, I feel like we have to address those who were saying, oh, just link your PSN, stop crying, it only takes a couple minutes, to which I have to say, you're missing the point here. To allow people to buy a game and start playing it without a required PSN link, only to come back months later and force people to link a PSN to play, well past the point to where most players would have already put enough hours into the game to make it ineligible for a refund, is already an absolutely scummy way of doing this, and you can't deny that. Let's say you go to the grocery store and you buy an eggplant. Then you get home and you're about to start cooking or doing whatever you're doing with an eggplant. Then the cashier from the grocery store you bought the eggplant from barges in your house, rips the eggplant from out your hands and tells you that you can't have the eggplant anymore unless you donate 1 penny to charity. Like, sure, I could donate 1 penny to charity, but I already bought the fucking eggplant without donating to charity, so give me my fucking eggplant. Like, if you're selling something to someone, you can't just let them buy what you're selling, use the item past the 2-week warranty, then tell them they can't use the item they already paid for unless they do you a favor. I think we can all agree that would be ridiculous, right? Now, when people expressed this concern in their outrage over the game, people defending this move were pointing to the game's store page on Steam, where it actually says that the game requires you to link a PlayStation account to Steam in order to play the game. They also pointed out that this notice has been there since the very day the game launched. And they're not wrong. You have to scroll down past the buy button quite a bit to even spot this, but it has been there since day one. Some were also pointing out that upon launching the game for the first time, you are met with a screen that gives you an option to link a PSN account, and in which tells you that doing so is required. The problem with both of these instances, however, is that despite saying this is required, it was in fact not required because people were still allowed to both buy and play the game for months after launch. I mean, there's even a giant skip button you can click to bypass that screen, making this whole thing optional and not actually required. And let's be honest, do we really even think twice when skipping something like this? There are countless games that give you notices just like these, but lets you skip them and nothing ever happens, so I wouldn't blame most of the player base for doing the same here because I think that's just something we're conditioned to. In fact, I just wanted to point out some of the idiots that have been trying to pull gotchas on Twitter, like this guy saying, oh, would you look at this? I'm trying to play Minecraft Legends on my PlayStation Portal, and this notification saying I have to link my Microsoft account just popped up. And then he shows the screen where it tells him that in order to play the game with other people, he needs to link an account, along with a giant skip button right below the link button. Like, if you're going to try to make a point like this, at least read what's on the fucking screen before posting it. Holy shit. You had people doing the same thing for Sea of Thieves, which just released on PlayStation and actually legitimately requires you to set up and link a Microsoft account just to play, which for the record, I'm not a big fan of either, but there is a difference between launching a game with an actual requirement and then going the Helldivers route by pretending there was a requirement and then enforcing it after everybody had already bought into your hype. You know what I'm saying? I also feel like I should point out that there was a bit of drama happening within the Helldivers 2 Discord server, with a community manager named Spitz arguing that, quote, it's not like this is the first or even the 14th mainstream game to require a third-party account that takes a couple minutes to create, but if it's a deal breaker to have to take 120 seconds out of your day to enter an email and password, then forget about it, change your Steam review, and make your displeasure known on a platform where it matters. This community manager was also caught throwing shade at a member of their community when receiving backlash for making this comment, but Spitz has since apologized and given his true thoughts on the situation, but more on that later. There is a reason to Arrowhead not enforcing this rule to begin with, after all. Johan Pilestedt, the CEO of Arrowhead Game Studios, who I will be pointing to multiple times during this video, put out a tweet saying that he is not blameless in all of this and that it was his decision to disable account linking at launch so that players could play the game and didn't ensure everybody knew about this requirement, despite the studio themselves knowing this fact 6 months prior to the game's launch. So obviously Arrowhead could have been more transparent here. It's also important to note, however, that Arrowhead isn't responsible for selling the game. Sony does that because they're the publisher and everything is ultimately up to them. But if they had just forced everyone to link a PSN account at the very beginning of all this all could have been avoided, but there was an apparent issue with this linking requirement that caused them to disable it during the game's launch in order to allow more people to play the game. Another side to this issue is that the PlayStation Network is only available in 69 countries of the world, and some of those countries have extra requirements you have to account for to be able to even make a PSN account. So here are all the countries that don't have access to PSN. Just take a second to look at how many people this would be affecting. Everybody living in any of these countries cannot legally make a PSN account. The reason I say legally is because there are people defending this whole thing by saying, oh, they can just use a VPN and get an account from another country, it's not that big of a deal. Well, ask Sony themselves. Their terms of service prohibits anyone from selecting a country or region outside of their residence and in which their account will be registered in. Sony also reserves the right to suspend, terminate, or restrict any account that uses or was created using false information, or that they determine was created or used for a purpose that violates this agreement. So what Sony basically told those who live in these countries is, hey, since we're making it so that you can't play this game without a PSN account, you'll either have to deal with getting scammed by us, or you'll have to create a PSN account illegally and we will ban you for it, so you're still gonna get scammed either way. Now back to what was happening with Spitz, the community manager on the Helldivers 2 Discord. It was about this time in the drama where the community had realized just how many people wouldn't have access to the game any longer, so Spitz came out and said, yeah, I was completely unaware of how many countries didn't have the ability to make a PSN account when I made that statement. I deeply regret implying that it was so easy for everyone to just sign up and not have to worry about it. It's absolutely not our intention to force people to break Sony TOS or just not play the game if they're in a restricted region. There needs to be a better solution. Another big issue people had with this PSN account requirement is actually an issue with the security of the PlayStation Network itself. Like with most third-party accounts you can sign up for, upon signing you're essentially handing over your personal data to that company, which they will either sell to other companies or analyze to use against you for their own benefit. That's just the world we live in nowadays. Now, most people wouldn't really care about this, but some of them do, and they have the right to be concerned over something like that, which I think we can agree is understandable. So when you factor in the horrible track record Sony has falling victim to several large-scale data security breaches over the last decade, the most recent being in October of last year, I think it's reasonable to be upset with this PSN requirement being forced on so many people in the way that it was. And it was at this point where the public discourse surrounding Sony's decision was really starting to ramp up, with thousands of players beginning to issue refund requests of the game on Steam as a means of protest. Some people, after multiple requests, were even getting their game refunded by members of Steam support understanding of the situation, regardless of their playtime. Like one user who got his refund request granted even after playing the game for almost 100 hours. Helldivers 2 also received over 62,000 negative reviews the very first day, and over another 114,000 coming in the next day, making the recent reviews on the game's Steam page reach mostly negative and the overall reviews to mixed. Then the next day receiving over another 154,000 negative reviews, moving the recent reviews down to overwhelmingly negative. At one point, overall reviews of the game actually dipped under the 50% mark, meaning that in total it had more negative reviews than positive reviews. So in the span of 48 hours, this game went from being a very well-received game to being absolutely bombshelled. Some people have been calling this review bombing, but I like to refer to review bombing as a bombardment of unnecessary and unwarranted negative reviews, which clearly wasn't the case here. I mean, Sony should have known better to piss off a player base who continues to knock out 2-week-long major orders within the span of a few hours, so let's be honest, they had this coming. And it didn't help when Spitz actually started encouraging players to leave negative reviews and to refund the game on Steam in order to, quote, give them more pull in the discussions with Sony. That takes absolute balls coming from someone who not only works for Sony, but whose voice carries a lot of weight in their community, which Sony is well aware of. But things got even crazier when it was found out that Sony had just recently changed their policy listed on their facts page on their own website, where on the morning of May 3rd it stated that, quote, signing into PSN is optional when playing a PlayStation game on PC. But a little while later, specifically at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, after the outrage started getting crazy, mind you, people noticed that it now said some PlayStation games may require you to sign in and link to an account for PSN. Now, in what case has anybody ever seen this happen, where a company had to completely change a part of their policy through a facts listing after they had learned that their community wasn't having any of their bullshit? And to do so secretly behind everyone's backs as if we wouldn't notice too. Never have I ever seen anything like that. Now, players following everything happening in the Helldivers 2 Discord server were trying to get more information out of Arrowhead, who were assuring players that the decision to enforce the PSN requirement, the Steam announcement of it in the first place, and the facts change all came directly from Sony, and Arrowhead had no part in that. In fact, they were actually saying that they were having internal discussions about it all and are seemingly getting some pushback from Sony, but are exploring other options. Again, I just wanted to point this out so that nobody's confused about the situation, so I can ensure you guys that the developers are not at fault here, but instead Sony themselves. So of course you'd think the best way to go about this would be to simply remove the PSN requirement so people living everywhere in the world would still be able to enjoy this game. But let me ask you something real quick. If you were Sony and you made this decision, and you saw the criticism you were receiving from hundreds of thousands of fans all across the world, what would you have done to rectify and control the situation? Would you A, do the smart thing and promise to revert the PSN requirement? B, play damage control and allow those who already purchased Helldivers 2 to refund the game regardless of playtime or time since purchasing? Or C, do the absolute dumbest decision you could have made and delist Helldivers 2 on Steam from the majority of the countries and territories in the world? Well, if you answered C, you'd be correct. You heard me right. Sony practically banned the game from being played and purchased in 177 regions of the world. With there being only 195 independent countries on planet Earth, you can see just how much more restricting this move is. Some of these countries, mind you, still have access to PSN to an extent, but have certain restrictions and roadblocks you have to get past to make a PSN account and were delisted for that reason, like the Philippines for example. But they didn't tell these people that they could get refunds or ensure they wouldn't lose access to the game so their money wasn't wasted. They just delisted it from Steam in those areas and made it impossible to purchase, which if you think about it only really solves half the problem. Restricting the game from being bought from the majority of planet Earth doesn't change the fact that people who've already bought your game are still going to get scammed. You even had people going to Pilestet on Twitter saying, "Hey, PlayStation Network isn't supported in my country, what am I supposed to do?" With the motherfucking CEO of the studio behind this game simply responding, "I don't know." Now, how much darker could this situation have gotten, honestly? Memes were going rampant, people were pissed beyond belief, you even had some of the most committed PlayStation fanboy grifters and con artists taking to social media and joining the fight against Sony, breaking their character by siding with the PC community against a decision Sony had made. Do you know how bad you have to fuck up to get me to agree with something Reforge Gaming said? Do you? But just when the little light of hope started to flicker out of existence, I woke up from a 7 p.m. nap to this tweet posted from PlayStation's own account on the night of May 5th. Helldivers fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linking update. The May 6th update, which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linking for new players and for current players beginning May 30th, will not be moving forward. We're still learning what is best for PC players, and your feedback has been invaluable. Thanks again for your continued support of Helldivers 2, and we'll keep you updated on future plans. This announcement was met with immediate rejoice all over social media. Over hundreds of thousands of negative reviews later, and thousands of refund requests later, Sony pulled their heads out of their asses and made the right call. People started flocking to change their reviews to positive and to cancel their refund requests. The game received a massive 207,000 positive reviews the first day after this announcement, and almost 55,000 the very next day. And now the game's review score is back to what it was before all this mess. You also had the CEO joking about adding a cake design to the game, inspired by what the review scores looked like, which I highly doubt Sony would let slide, as funny as it is. But this war isn't over just yet, because Sony has yet to re-enlist Helldivers 2 in those 177 countries and territories they delisted the game from. I don't know if this is more of them trying to be sneaky about it or something, but there's a huge part of the community that are still calling for people to leave their reviews negative so that we, as a negotiating party, don't lose our leverage against Sony. In fact, Pilestet has ensured those in their Discord that he's pushing Sony to get this reversed, saying, quote, "I'm speaking to our partners at PlayStation and Valve and pushing for it to be undone. Getting this account linking took a Herculean effort, but I won't rest in my desire to have it available everywhere. At the end of the day, I'm with the majority of people when I say that the more people that are able to play a game, the better it is for everyone involved." So should Sony re-enlist Helldivers 2 in those 177 regions? Absolutely. But will they? Probably not, considering they already got the response they wanted after reverting the decision with the PSN requirement, and I doubt they'd budge on anything further than that. And it was actually during this drama when it was found out that Ghost of Tsushima, a Sony-owned PlayStation exclusive title launching on PC for the first time on May 16th, actually has the same PSN account requirement that Helldivers 2 had listed on the game's Steam page. One user expressed concern over this in a reply to the game studio, Sucker Punch Productions, over on Twitter, to which the studio assured everyone saying, "Hey guys, we won't require you to link a PSN account in order to play the single-player game. It's only required for the Legends Online multiplayer mode and for using the PlayStation overlay." This means that in the event you were excited or at least interested in playing the Legends multiplayer mode, then you're shit out of luck. Actually, it turns out that on May 10th, Sony not only delisted Ghost of Tsushima from those same 177 regions I mentioned earlier, meaning nobody from these regions could even purchase the base game anyways, but they have now actually tripled down on their decision and began issuing refunds to those who pre-ordered the game in those affected regions. You know, you'd think it'd be a pretty dumb decision, business-wise at least, for Sony to just restrict the game sales from so many people, so this means they must really want people to join PSN for some reason. They're straight up saying, hey, if you don't have PSN, you can't play our games on PC. Really shitty behavior coming from Sony. And apparently, people started to review bomb Helldivers 1 for some reason? I don't understand why someone would do that, other than them possibly confusing the two somehow, either because they can't read, or because they're doing this to go after Arrowhead or something. I don't know, man. People are weird. Although Sony has reverted their PSN account requirement and appeased the community in that case, this whole ordeal was an absolute PR disaster on Sony's part, and there's no denying that they left behind a little stain on their reputation when it comes to their audience trusting and respecting them. It's also shown that whatever side of the bullshit console war you stand on, we can all agree that this move was stupid and anti-consumer at the very least. I also encourage those upset with this situation to keep the same energy in the event other publishers like Microsoft, EA, Ubisoft, Nintendo, etc. starts doing stuff like this. The last thing we need right now is for people to play double standards and hold one company accountable while turning a blind eye when another company does the same thing, you know? The reason I bring that up is because I'm sure you're aware of the recent move Microsoft has made with them shutting down 4 of their studios, including Arcane Austin, who are behind Dishonored, Prey, and recently Redfall, as well as Tango Gameworks, who are behind The Evil Within, Ghostwire Tokyo, and the most recently appraised Hi-Fi Rush. Ah, man, does that really hurt to say. Anyways, I hope to talk about everything going on in that side of things in my next video, so if you want to catch that, make sure to be a true super citizen by subscribing to the channel, ringing the notification bell, and liking this video in order to spread the word. But for now, I'll leave you here. This is Rap Zombie, signing out.